Evelyn Kensington was the epitome of high society, a woman of grace, power, and unimaginable wealth. Her life was a parade of charity galas, exclusive luncheons, and lavish shopping sprees. Her every whim was catered to by a small army of servants, but there was one person she looked down upon more than any other: her chauffeur, Marcus. Marcus had been with the Kensington family for years. A tall, imposing black man with a quiet demeanor, he never let Evelyn's condescending remarks faze him. He was professional, polite, and always did his job with excellence. But to Evelyn, Marcus was just another servant, someone beneath her notice except when she needed to be driven somewhere. One crisp autumn morning, Evelyn demanded Marcus take her to a high-profile charity event across town. She had spent the morning being pampered by her stylist, and her mood was already on edge from what she considered a less-than-perfect manicure. As Marcus opened the car door for her, she didn't acknowledge him, stepping inside without a glance. The drive through the city was silent, except for the sound of Evelyn's heels clicking against the car's floor as she crossed her legs. She barely noticed the world outside the tinted windows, her mind occupied with thoughts of the evening's event and who she needed to impress. Marcus, as usual, drove with precision. The streets were busy, and the traffic was heavier than expected. Evelyn's impatience grew with every passing minute. She began to tap her fingers on the leather seat, each tap echoing her growing irritation. Suddenly, the car jolted as Marcus braked hard. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat, and she looked up, ready to lash out. But before she could say a word, she saw what had caused the sudden stop. A young boy had darted out into the street, chasing after a loose ball. Marcus's quick reflexes had saved the child from a potentially fatal accident. "Watch where you're going," Evelyn snapped at Marcus, more concerned about the delay than the child's safety. Marcus met her gaze in the rearview mirror, his expression calm, though there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. They continued in silence until they reached the event. Evelyn stepped out, smoothing her designer dress, and made her way to the entrance without a word of thanks. The night wore on, and the event was as dazzling as Evelyn had hoped. She mingled with the city's elite, her smile never wavering as she charmed her way through the crowd. It wasn't until the event ended that she noticed something was off. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. She waited by the entrance, her irritation growing as the minutes ticked by. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus pulled up. Evelyn could see the tension in his posture as he got out to open the door for her. She glared at him, her anger barely contained. "What took you so long?" she demanded, stepping into the car. Marcus didn't respond, his silence only fueling her frustration. As they drove through the city, Evelyn couldn't hold back any longer. "You work for me, Marcus. When I tell you to be somewhere, I expect you to be there. You think just because you've been with this family for years, you can take liberties?" Marcus remained silent, his focus on the road. Evelyn huffed, crossing her arms. "I should have known better than to trust someone like you with such responsibilities." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he said nothing. The rest of the drive was suffocatingly silent, and by the time they reached her mansion, Evelyn was fuming. She stormed out of the car without waiting for Marcus to open the door, slamming it behind her. The following days were tense. Evelyn found herself replaying the events over and over in her mind. She had never been so angry at a servant before. She expected an apology, but Marcus remained professional, his demeanor unchanged, though there was a distance between them that hadn't been there before. Evelyn's anger eventually cooled, but something else replaced it, a nagging discomfort she couldn't shake. She noticed the way Marcus carried himself, the way he held his head high despite her harsh words. It unsettled her, made her feel small in a way she couldn't understand. One day, as they were driving through a particularly rough neighborhood, the car came to a stop at a red light. Evelyn glanced out the window and saw a group of young black children playing on the sidewalk. They were laughing, their joy untainted by the world around them. She saw Marcus watching them through the rearview mirror, a soft smile on his lips. It was a rare moment of emotion from him, and it caught Evelyn off guard. "Do you have children, Marcus?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. "No, ma'am." Evelyn nodded, unsure of what to say next. The light turned green, and they continued in silence. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's curiosity about Marcus grew. She found herself watching him more closely, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The way he always held the door open for her, the way he never complained, no matter how unreasonable her demands were. One evening, after another charity event, Evelyn found herself alone in the car with Marcus once again. The city lights blurred past, and she felt a strange urge to break the silence. "Marcus, do you enjoy working for my family?" Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting hers for a brief moment. "I do, ma'am. It's a good job." Evelyn nodded, but the answer didn't satisfy her. She wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but the walls she had built around herself were too high. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Evelyn had just finished a particularly grueling day of shopping and was in a foul mood. As Marcus drove her home, they passed a park where a group of children were playing. Evelyn watched them for a moment, a flicker of something, perhaps envy, crossing her mind. She turned to Marcus and said, "Pull over." Marcus hesitated but did as he was told. Evelyn stepped out of the car, much to Marcus's surprise, and walked toward the park. She didn't know what had driven her to do this, but she felt an overwhelming need to break free from the confines of her life, if only for a moment. The children didn't notice her at first, but as she approached, their laughter died down, and they watched her with wide eyes. Evelyn felt out of place, her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair starkly contrasting with the carefree chaos of the playground. She didn't know what to say, so she simply stood there, watching the children play. It was a world so foreign to her, yet it stirred something deep within her, a longing she couldn't quite place. Marcus watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. He had never seen Evelyn like this, so vulnerable and out of her element. It was as if the walls she had built around herself were crumbling, brick by brick. After a while, Evelyn turned and walked back to the car. She didn't say a word as Marcus opened the door for her. The drive home was silent, but it was a different kind of silence, a comfortable one. The next day, Evelyn did something she had never done before. She invited Marcus into her home for a cup of tea. He was hesitant at first, unsure of her intentions, but he accepted. They sat in the grand parlor, the silence heavy between them. Evelyn fidgeted with her cup, unsure of how to start the conversation. Finally, she looked up and met Marcus's gaze. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I've treated you unfairly, and I'm sorry." Marcus was taken aback. He had never expected Evelyn to apologize, let alone acknowledge her behavior. "You've always done your job with grace and professionalism, and I've taken that for granted. I want to do better, to be better." Marcus nodded, his expression softening. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot." The conversation continued, and for the first time, Evelyn and Marcus spoke as equals. They shared stories, laughed, and found common ground in their experiences. The barriers between them began to fade, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Over time, Evelyn's relationship with Marcus evolved. She no longer saw him as just a chauffeur, but as a friend and confidant. She began to see the world through his eyes, and it changed her in ways she never thought possible. The lesson Evelyn learned was a harsh one, but it was necessary. It taught her the value of humility, empathy, and the importance of seeing beyond the surface. She realized that wealth and status meant nothing if they were used to belittle others. Evelyn Kensington was still the epitome of high society, but she was no longer the woman who looked down on others. She had learned that true wealth was not in the things she owned, but in the relationships she built and the lives she touched. And in the end, it was Marcus who had taught her the most valuable lesson of all. As Evelyn and Marcus continued their newfound friendship, she realized how much she had been missing in life by living behind her walls of privilege. She made a conscious effort to treat everyone around her with kindness and respect, starting with Marcus. Over time, Evelyn found herself not just changing her behavior, but changing her heart. The harsh lessons she learned became the turning point in her life, reminding her that true richness lies in how you treat others, not in what you own.